right, guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the second episode of the season. So, before I get started, I want to say something that's been on my heart a little bit the last week. I don't think I probably have to tell very many people how much tragedy there has been in the last week. And some of it actually took place in my own backyard when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. That happened in Utah, and I live in Utah. I live in northern Utah, so it was a couple hours south of me, but I'm very, very familiar with the area. I was actually born in the city it happened in. I haven't lived there since I was about 3 years old, I think, but um, I've been down there a lot. Even on that campus, I had been to that campus. I didn't attend college there, but it was a campus that I toured in trying to decide what college I was going to attend. I've attended writing conferences there. I mean, just it's very, very familiar. So to have this happen and, to put our state on the map in such a horrific way, it's really rocked a lot of us. And I'm not here to tell you what to believe. Um, I don't think this thing should ever happen. Like, it shouldn't be part of our society at all. Of course, we all know that it is, unfortunately. But no one should ever, ever be harmed in any way for expressing their opinion, much less killed. And this was a cold-blooded murder. It was as bad as it gets, really. And I would say that whether this was someone I agreed with 100% or disagreed with 100% and thought he was an idiot, either way, it should just never happen. And, when something like this happens, I think the first thing you do is you cling on to your family a little bit and deal with the emotions you have about it. And there have been a lot of emotions about it, clearly, and rightly so. And then after that, you start applying it to your life and the different parts of your life, the different elements of who you are, and asking, what can I learn from this? What is this trying to teach me? So of course, I have lots of things that I have applied it to, my writing and my teachings, what I tell my students and my methods, and then of course I think of our little fandom here. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge what happened mostly. It doesn't feel right to just dive into the next episode and pretend like nothing happened because a lot has happened. And everyone has a right to feel however they feel about it. But you guys have heard me say before that you've heard me encourage you to not lower yourselves to the level of the trolls online. Um, we have every right to believe what we believe and post what we want to post and, to espouse our own beliefs and to congregate based on those beliefs, even if it is just congregating online, right? But I've told you guys before that I don't think that we should troll other people, be nasty to other, even though they are nasty to us. I'm not denying that at all. Like, that's just part of being on the internet, right? But don't lower yourself to that. And this just made me think of that all the more. And, first of all, let me just be very clear in saying that I don't want to downplay anything that's happened or upplay anything that doesn't need to be upplayed or shouldn't be. And by that, I mean, most people who are trolls on the internet are never ever going to do anything as heinous as kill someone. Like, those are two completely different things, 100% that is true. But they actually are two sides of the same coin. Because when you have a troll on the internet who goes after somebody, posts nasty things, harasses them, tries to discredit them or ruin their life, based on what's on the internet, that is them lashing out at someone who disagrees with them, who has a different opinion of them. And while, once again, I'm sure most 99.999% of people who do that will never ever escalate it beyond that, when that is taken to a really fanatical level, a criminal level, that's where we start to see violence. So all I'm saying is, why perpetuate it at all? Just please, please don't. I invite you to rise above that, and I really do think that I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Of course, we all attract some of the haters, but in terms of true, genuine followers, I don't attract that kind of person anyway. So I'm sure most of you would never do anything like that, and you aren't internet trolls. But I just, like I said, I wanted to address it and acknowledge what has happened and say that, on a more positive note, I actually am really proud of our fandom because while we have to acknowledge that unfortunately there are trolls even in the Bethel and TD fandom, for the most part, we are a very positive and very hopeful fandom who really lift each other up and support each other and encourage each other. And I love that about us, right? I've met some of my closest friends in the world through this fandom. So let's just continue to do that. We all know that when Beth reappears, we're going to have to brace for a little bit of hatred that's going to come our way, and that's fine. Let them rail against us. But I'm just begging you, please, please don't lower yourself to that level. It really does you more harm than it does anyone else. And that has been driven home a lot this last week with more than one tragedy that has happened. Um, so anyway, that's all I had to say. And I hope that everyone is doing well. And anyone who, has been harmed by this, whether because you were very close to it or just had a lot of emotions about it, I hope you're doing okay and that you're healing. I'll send you healing prayers. A lot of people in my family were really rocked by it. So it was a dark couple of days. But we're starting to get back into a routine here. So, with all that said, I promise that's the only doomsday thing I will say. We can jump into the episode now, and I think it's perfectly okay for us to, like I said, espouse our own beliefs on the internet. We have every right to do that. We should do that. I think it's even perfectly okay for us to be somewhat triumphant when Beth reappears, because we've been waiting for this for a long time, right? So long as we aren't lashing out at other people in a negative way. All right. So, with all of that said, let's jump into the episode. When I first recorded this, I forgot to do the spoiler warning, so I'm going back to put this in because I promised you guys I would do spoiler warnings. So here's my official spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about pretty much everything that happens in Daryl Dixon Season 3, Episode 2. If you don't want spoilers, I highly recommend that you watch the episode first and then come back to my analysis. I'm also going to talk at the end about a theory. I don't think it's really a spoiler, but it's a way that I'm seeing as being set up here, and from the trailer for next time, I think they're heading in that direction. But it's not something that's happened yet. It's just something that I think is going to happen, so call it a theory. So just fair warning, I'm going to talk about that too at the very end. All right, so let's jump in. Now, I will say that I really enjoyed this episode. It went by really fast. By the time it got to the end, I was like, no, it can't be over yet. But this was one of those episodes that there was a lot less in terms of individual examples of symbolism. Don't get me wrong, there still is a lot of things that I found, but the first episode, I said this, I know Galadriel Jones said it, but we were just constantly pausing to write things down because it felt like every instant, every line of dialogue, every single thing that popped up in the background was significant. And this was less that way. This was more plot, for the season. So a little bit less on the symbolism. But when that happens, I tend to look at the overall plot and the structure of it, and we can definitely find some parallels there. So we start with this sunshine trickling through the trees, and we've always thought they don't do this all the time, but it's been particular moments, even back in the flagship show where they had soft music and sunlight coming through the trees, and we always thought that was a little bit of a Beth thing, though of course we can't really prove that. So recall that at the end of the last episode, Carol was just gone when Daryl returned. And that did feel like a Beth callback in terms of the 17 days. Like he left and he left her somewhere, and when he came back, she was gone. Now, of course, he finds Carol pretty quickly here. She is sitting by the river, watching this young couple. It's Roberto and Justina. And I just had to smile at this part because I gotta say, I kind of love Carol in this very happy place that she's at. I mean, this is very unlike the Carol that we've seen before. She's watching them and she's just smiling and appreciating that they're just this young couple in love. And she has this like, aw, kind of vibe to her. And Carol's just usually isn't like that. And historically, she would have been more like, oh, this is not good. Oh, they're gonna get hurt. Oh, I need to teach them to kill people, and she's not doing that here. So that was just kind of fun. Now, before I move on though, I want to say that I think it's interesting that Daryl found her by the river. So again, I'm just thinking in terms of Beth and what this could be pointing to. Obviously, he didn't find Beth again, so that's different. But it is interesting that he found her by the river because we've always seen water, bodies of water, as a Beth symbol. And I'm not even sure exactly how to interpret that, other than I think that it is symbolic that he found Carol by the river. The other thing that I started thinking about is that at the river, we have Justina and Roberto, right? This romantic couple. And I started thinking, we've always thought that the river was a Beth symbol, but I started thinking maybe it's more of a Beth and Daryl symbol or even a romance symbol because they get to the river and there's this romance happening, right? And that would actually be interesting, especially given what a big role the river played in Find Me. And no, I'm not saying that that means that Daryl was in love with Leah. Actually, to be fair, we didn't really see Leah on the river that much. I mean, they had the fishing scene, but that wasn't like the big river that Daryl was always tromping through, and of course we know that Leah was a parallel anyway. But then I thought, the river really seemed to be about him searching for Rick, and obviously that's not a romantic relationship. So maybe the river could even just represent someone you really love, and it doesn't have to be romantic. It can be either romantic or platonic. But anyway, just kind of some stuff I was thinking of. The river was interesting, and they don't stay on the river for very long. This first sequence when the bad guys come and everything, but after that, they don't really go back to the river. So just the way that they use it here was kind of interesting to me. Okay, so of course Daryl gets there. Carol, they're so perfect. She's being all romantic about it, and she doesn't want him to hurt them or take their things. So she's not happy that he's planning it. But then these guys show up. Um, Justina and Roberto hide, but they see their supplies over here, um, and eventually find them, and they're going to kill them, right? But then, of course, Daryl steps in and kills them, but one of them gets away, this guy. And Daryl chases him, but the guy still gets away. So then we have this thing where he, basically Roberto doesn't want to go back. He wants to keep going, but Daryl pretty much holds him at gunpoint and says, you're going to have to take us because Carol's hurt. I'm not letting my friend die out here. They help them. Took a few pictures here. He tells them that it's not good inside, but they get there. This is the first we see Path. These walker heads are interesting. I mean, they're grotesque, but I think they're kind of funny. Now, we don't know right away why she's so upset. You kind of maybe assume that maybe she's mad that they left, and we don't find out till later that it's actually the opposite of that. But Justina says they helped us, and she's, hurt, so let us in. This guy kind of made me smile, Gustavo. It occurred to me when I was watching this, I wonder if he's like Jerry, like he looks really big and tough, but he's really a softie. I don't know if that's true. We didn't really learn that much about his character, but we do see him inside helping with the pigs at one point. So I kind of think he's like a super nice guy that just looks really scary. So they have him at the gate, which is funny. And of course, they meet Fede, who is Justina's uncle. Got a little bit of a tense scene here. The thing is, most of what we see in this episode is what we saw in the trailer. It really is the setup for what's going to happen for the rest of the season. So most of this was probably pretty familiar to everyone because we'd seen it in the trailer. Um, he welcomes them. Now, here's the thing I want to say about Justina. Justina is really a lot like Beth. And I had to think about it for a little while. I mean, the first way in which I thought that is that she is very compassionate with people. We could also point out that she's helping her grandmother with the medicine here. She's not the doctor herself, but she's helping and kind of knows something about it because she's probably seen her grandmother do this her whole life. And, similarly, Beth was helping Edwards at Grady. But it also occurred to me that Justina doesn't actually have any parents. Fede is her uncle, and this is her grandmother, which is Fede's mother. But we don't really know what happened to her parents, So if we're talking about Beth, post prison, that was true of her too. She didn't have any parents left, and you could see Rick as Beth's uncle, or at least kind of a relationship like that. So that occurred to me. And as we go through, I'll try to remember to point out ways in which she is actually very compassionate. I mean, Roberto didn't want to come back. And that's because he's trying to protect her. He knows she could be taken during the ceremony and everything. She could be chosen, but it was her that said, "No, she's hurt. We should take them back. We should help them." And that feels very like Beth and Daryl. Now, Roberto may not be exactly like Daryl on the surface. He definitely isn't as much of a survivor as Daryl is, but he is looking after her. And you can see Daryl just going, "Nope, not doing that. We're keeping you safe. We're not going to help these other people." You know what I mean? It just feels very coded to them. Fede gets mad at Roberto here. He doesn't want to let them stay because they're strangers. But of course, Antonio says, "You can stay with me. I have room for you." They saved our children. And he says, yes. So they head here. I actually love this cat that really takes to Carol. I think he's funny. then we have this just interesting, I don't have a whole lot to say about it in terms of symbolism, but it's just an interesting conversation here that he has with Roberto, who wants Daryl to help them leave. And, Daryl's going, I don't get it. This seems like a pretty good place. You've got people that care about you. But he says, he specifically, I mean, this is like a callback, I think, for Daryl, because he says, nothing is good when I'm not with her. Do you know how that is to feel that way? And as we all say, I don't think I think we can say pretty confidently that he didn't feel that way about Leah because he left Leah, right? He was more than happy to leave her. Um, Maybe a little bit about Isabel, or at least it was getting there, but I don't know that it 100% got there. But we all saw very clearly the way that he mourned for Beth after Coda. So she's the only one we 100% can say he did feel that way about her. So this is definitely a callback, and this is making him think back. And the thing that I think is interesting here is that Daryl is fighting it super hard, right? He's not going to say, oh, I have compassion for you about this, or oh, yes, I do know how that feels. I mean, he probably wouldn't say that anyway. We established in the last episode that he doesn't talk about his feelings like that. And he doesn't know Roberto very well. But you can tell he's trying very hard to not sympathize with these people because he doesn't want to get involved in them. So he's trying to have a very one-track mind and just be like, no, we're leaving, we're getting home, you deal with your own crap. So I think it's interesting that he says his father has forgotten. I mean, I think that's kind of a foreshadow of Antonio's relationship with Carol, but it's also really an interesting thing to say. And Daryl just goes, well, maybe your dad knows that's not the only thing that matters. But again, I think this is him trying really hard not to sympathize with Roberto. So Carol wakes up here. WD Way pointed out that we do get very clear shots of her jewelry, and her jewelry might be important. But what this reminded me of most is Consumed. And really, I mean, even though it's very spread out, it's not happening all in one episode. This is a lot like Consumed. I don't even know if I mentioned this in the last episode's analysis, but in Consumed, when they went off the bridge, Carol got hurt. And after that, she was hurt. She was limping around. And it was, you guys, it was even her shoulder. Remember that? I mean, it was kind of more near the front and it was bruising, but she pulled her shirt up a little bit so he could see it in Consumed. And it was even her shoulder that got hurt. And so here, obviously, it was her shoulder, but it was the back where she had that metal shrapnel from the last episode. And then she wakes up here in the morning. And so this reminded me a lot of Consumed. And like it's a very much a replay in some ways. And there's there's the kitty cat again. The cat just makes me smile. I don't even know why. It's just funny. So they go out in the morning. We see more of Roberto and Justina. Um, I don't know what's up with this guy. He's always watching them, and he seems to be like not very friendly. In fact, I don't know if I got a picture of it. I guess I'll see when I get there. But in that scene where Daryl's walking along the street and turns and looks over his shoulder, it was in every trailer and every teaser that they had. He's actually looking at this guy because this guy walks past him, and this guy's just like glaring at people all the time. So I'm not entirely sure who he is, but I'm going to keep an eye on him. So we had some food here that was mentioned, and some of it I had to look up. I had to look up a bunch of Spanish terms because I don't speak Spanish. But he says they have Galatian beef, and then I guess I didn't get the rest of them in the screenshot, but he says, okay, I'm probably going to mispronounce these, androlas, which is sausage, lamprey, which is actually fish, and then persebes, which is goose barnacles. And he actually does mention barnacles. He says that in English. They are a delicacy, like he says. So I was looking some of these up, but I'm just saying, I mean, the sausage and the beef, we don't see as much symbolism around, but the fish we do. And then the barnacles are interesting. We always see near the sea, near the water, when we have those walkers coming out of the sea, we always see barnacles on them. So clearly, this is symbolic. And the fact that he mentions that they're delicacies, it is probably part of the living versus surviving, the fact that they can get a hold of delicacies, and that's something they actually have here. So they're a fairly well-established town, and people live here pretty well. They're not starving. They're not just surviving. This is actually a fairly good living situation, except, of course, for the lottery that they do, right? So then, of course, Path rides up and says that they're here, meaning the king. As the king comes in, he's going to explain it to them. Once a year, they visit the northern villages. It was hard to tell exactly what this is. It looks like some wine. I'm not sure what these boxes are. They might be medical supplies. But we do have an example of something that seems an awful lot like treasure, which reminds us of the Rock in the Road, you know, story with treasure beneath the stone. Now, I actually got a few of these details wrong, which, you know, we always say the trailer can make things appear a little bit deceptively. I assumed that this guy was the father of the girl who was being taken in the present day. He's actually not. He's the father of the girl who was taken 5 years ago. And he says, "Where is she? Where is my little girl? Is she okay?" Because he's never seen her again. And at one point he says, "Tell her I love her." And he's dragged away, but he did kind of attack, you know, the king and his caravan. Um, there were a lot of fives mentioned in this episode. Um, his daughter was taken 5 years ago. This is the first time I noticed it. Then they think it's strange that a woman was brought, but this is, of course, Path's love, who she has not seen in 10 years. So they meet eyes, and then the king says tomorrow that they're going to eat and have the whole ceremony and the celebration and everything. So Antonio explaining more, they never see them again. This was interesting to me that we don't know what happens to them. I don't know if we're going to find out what happens to them. You know, they tell us that they are apparently married off, but they don't really know. And then when Path and Elena are talking, she asks if Sandra, which is the girl who was taken 5 years ago, I'm assuming that that's this guy's daughter, the one that was dragged away. I think he is Sandra's father. And she asks if she's okay. And she says yes, but she's a little weird about it. You know, like, you know, you kind of get the sense of, you know, maybe technically, physically, she's okay, but is she really okay emotionally? You know what I mean? So we don't really know. But what that reminds me of is Grady. I mean, they told us that, you know, there was the whole ward system. And we, you know, clearly there was rape going on there. But, you know, there was so little that we actually understood about what was going on at Grady. You know, what are they actually doing? Are they working on a cure? Are they communicating with people? You know, we have our theories about that, and I think we have a lot of evidence for it. But they were really mysterious about what was going on there. And this is kind of the same. They don't know where these girls are being taken or what's happening to them. And chances are it's not a good thing. So this is this guy, this father, he's being tortured. This is really gross. It's something akin to a swan dive, if you've ever heard of that, but probably eventually his shoulders are going to dislocate. So this is pretty torturous. This is pretty gross. Okay, here's another five. It's when Carol's sitting outside Antonio's home and listening to him and Roberto uh, fight. And that's interesting. He's talking about Justina here. She got lucky 5 times. So we have the luck thing going on there, but that means that she's been, I assume they do it once a year, right? And so she's been to the ceremony 5 times and she's never been chosen. So he's saying she's been lucky not to be chosen 5 times. Um, I have something else that I haven't quite nailed down that I think is a parallel here that has to do with these girls being taken. But I think I'll get to that in just a minute. But it was just another five there. Then Daryl comes back. He's got beans that he apparently stole from somewhere, and he said they'll go with the hot dogs. So we have another mention of the hot dogs. WD Way pointed out that this looks very green, this picture, and it's water, you know, green, Beth, water, all of that. Carol wants to help them, of course. Here are the pigs. We noticed the pigs were pink, pink and black, but still pink. Um, we have all the girls who are, you know, going to be in the lottery, who are getting ready. So this is Alba, and this is her first time ever being in one, which sucks because she's the one who gets chosen. But then Elena, who is, so she's married to the king, so she actually is like the quote unquote queen. She comes in and compliments them all, and then we realize that she's actually got an ulterior motive here. She's sitting out here so that she can see Path and sends her a note, and they are able to kind of just lock eyes. So then they're all setting up for the party. And then we have this part from the trailer again where he's explaining to Daryl, you know, what's going on here. And he says, you know, he's just trying to protect his son and he thinks that makes him a bad father. But Daryl says, if you're worried about how you're doing, you're probably doing just fine. Um, So then we have the race. I did think it was funny at the end of the episode, at the episode Insider, that one of the directors talked about how they had to train the pigs to race. And pigs are usually very untrainable because they're very stubborn and have very strong individual personalities. I didn't know that about pigs. I think that's funny. So apparently they had to really train these pigs to run. So we've got more explanation here, and then they do the race. So here's the thing, what I was saying a minute ago. It makes sense that they use pigs here, like they almost had to, because the pigs, the way that they're used in The Walking Dead, they're almost always used as something sacrificial. So if you remember, like season 4, they used the pigs to lure the walkers away from the fence so that they could reinforce it, but the pigs died. They had to butcher the piglets. And then we saw them being offered as food to the saviors by the kingdom, and they first fed them walkers. They were trying to make the saviors sick. We didn't see much evidence that that worked or that the saviors necessarily got sick from that. But because they're food, I guess they're an apt symbol of sacrifice. And here, even though they don't actually kill the pigs, they put collars around each of them with one of the girls' names on it, and then the winning pig is what decides which of the girls will be chosen. And the girls are a sacrifice, right? So, I mean, we talked about this from the trailer even before the season began that, one of these girls being taken, feels very much like Beth being taken, and Daryl's going to go search for her and try to bring her back to Roberto. I think that's going to happen eventually, even though we don't get that far in this episode. That's definitely what the trailer was telling us. Um, so basically, these pigs are deciding which of the girls is getting sacrificed. So it works out in terms of the symbolism. Um, and I'll come back to a little bit more of that in just a minute. Um, Obviously, she's praying that it's not her, and the name that is read is Alba. Then we get this guy. Now, I will say that I don't know if it was just early or what, but I was not putting together what happened at the end. I was like really confused about it. And then when I went back and watched it again, then it clicked for me. So this guy is the guy that got away from Daryl when Daryl was trying to shoot him on the road. And he's the one guy that got away. So like him arriving here was like, dun dun dun, because he did get a good look at Daryl, not Carol so much because she hadn't, gotten there to where Roberto and Justina were yet. But I just wasn't quite putting it together. So this is where they're still preparing for the celebration. This is the dragon they're going to burn. We talked about the dragon symbolism. Oh, okay, so this is what I was talking about, this part, that was in all the trailers. So I didn't get the dark-skinned guy that was glaring at them before walked by Daryl, and Daryl turned and looked at him. So there's something about that guy. Like they're drawing our attention to him. First when he was glaring at Justina and Roberto when they were like making out and being flirty, in that scene. And then he just walked by Daryl, and they had Daryl turn around and look at him. So they are trying to draw our attention to this guy, but I'm not sure what role he's going to play yet. Then he goes and makes friends with Path, or tries to, and helps her with the pigs. Um, she says that they call the walkers the hollow ones. They always have to explain what people in different parts of the world call the walkers. I actually like that. She says it's because they have no heart and no soul. It's got a very Heart of Darkness feel to it, if you know that reference. But she's not very happy with him because he made Roberto and Justina come back, and we find out that she actually was trying to help them escape. That's why she didn't look very happy when they first came in. It wasn't that she was mad that they left, she was mad that they came back because they did a lot of work to sneak them out, and she obviously just wants them to be happy. Now, we haven't gotten an entire explanation of this in the show yet, but from the trailer and the behind the scenes when, the directors have talked about it, the reason she's doing that is because she was separated from the person she loved and she knows what that's like. So she's trying to help Justina and Roberto, and then Daryl made them come back, so she's kind of pissed at Daryl. So I think he was wanting to make friends with her because he felt kind of a kinship to her because she's doing in her community what the role that he usually does, which is just a lot of the grunt work, taking care of people, taking care of the animals, doing the guard duty outside the walls. I mean, she's a lot like Daryl, right? And so he was trying to make friends with her, but she's not all that happy with him just yet. So then she says, I'll be right back. He takes care of the pigs, and she goes and meets with Elena. This is where we learn that this other girl told Elena about Path, because clearly Path and Sandra were friends, right? This girl that was taken 5 years ago. And then Sandra told Elena about her, and that's how she knew where Path was. Now, I'm absolutely sure that this is something of a, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, a parallel prescription for the way that Beth is going to appear. Um, Now, like I said, even if you look at this particular shot, you can see these bullets, right, that are over Path's shoulder. So she's clearly like the more dominant, the more physical one. Like I said, she's a lot like Daryl. Elena is very pretty and she's very feminine in the way that she dresses. You see what I mean? So she's a lot more like Beth. This is a thing, you guys. Okay, they are definitely paralleling these things. So that said, obviously we don't know how it's going to play out, but it sounds like Beth is going to hear something of Daryl. Like maybe someone will talk about an American, like assuming that Beth is in Spain, which we don't even know for sure that's true, but hypothetically, if someone were to say something about an American who has a crossbow or something, you know what I mean? Or even just tell her his name. This is what he said his name was. And she's going to be like, oh, and then she's going to come looking for him because she recognizes the description or the name or whatever it is. I think this is pretty good evidence that that's the way it's going to play out. But of course, we don't know exactly the details of what that's going to look like. Um, See, a cowboy from Barcelona, a redneck with a crossbow. It just like fits very well to me. Then we get her name, Sandra. But of course, this woman is married to the king. I don't know what that will mean for Beth. Maybe something, maybe nothing. Once again, there's going to be really heavy parallels, but maybe not all of them, because we also have to pay attention to the plot that's going on here in this season, literally. Um, he references that his neighbor down the street had some pigs when he grew up. This is actually a direct callback to something with Isabel. I'm trying to remember where it was that happened. I don't even remember if it was season 1 or 2, but he was helping her torture information out of that guy, and he was talking about the pigs then. So this is a callback to that. Um, and Fede invites him and Carol to have dinner with them. I will say that I like Fede more than I thought I would. I assumed that he would be more of an antagonist, and I actually really like him. He's pretty level-headed. I mean, yes, he is letting this whole thing go down with the girls being taken, but he's also a leader who thinks he's doing the right thing for his people, and he's just less of an antagonist than I thought he would be. Interestingly, Elena peers out right here, and Daryl sees her. So he's watching really closely. He knows what's going on, probably more than Path realizes he does. So then we have the dinner. Carol looking at Antonio, and I kind of kept chuckling at this part because Carol's being nosy about it, and she is, really grilling them about what they're doing with these girls, and you can tell it's making Daryl really nervous. He keeps cutting her off and trying to get her to shut up, and the other funny thing is she just completely ignores him. So I was kind of chuckling at this part. Um, but this is a fun conversation. They were asking them news of the world. They talk about England. They talk about the US. Um, and Fede actually, now that he knows more about them, that Daryl is a tracker and a hunter, and that they used to, um, be some of the leaders, suddenly he's really interested in their insights. So I thought that was interesting and it also shows that he's open-minded, even though, he has some flaws for sure. When he learns that these people are people he might learn from, he's not like so arrogant that he's like, no, I know what I'm doing and you just go away. You know what I mean? Like he actually wants their insight. And so that actually says a lot about him. So this is where Carol starts kind of grilling him. And this poor woman, I felt so bad for her. So this is Alba's mother. Alba's the one who was chosen. And she's literally, even before they call on her to speak, she's literally sitting at the table crying. Like she has tears running down her face if you look at her. And then they basically want her to stand up and say why it's so great that her daughter is the one being sacrificed. And she just can't do it. I mean, this poor woman, I just wanted to give her a hug. But it was this part that actually really made it click for me how much Justina is like Beth. Because as soon as that happened and Alba's mother, I don't know that we're given we might be given Alba's mother's name, but I don't know what it is. As soon as that happened, she stood up and gave her a hug and told her to sit down. And then she took over speaking and saying what they basically wanted to hear. But the point is, she's very compassionate with people, but she's not afraid. She's very confident, but she's not rebellious or overbearing. And she's just very, very kind to people. Um, it's also interesting that Path is kind of watching this happen. She and Elena, of course, are looking at each other. Carol bugs them some more. Oh, we do have a jug of ethanol, so we have a reference to alcohol here, specifically to, ethanol, which has been used lots of different ways in The Walking Dead, but it does seem to be a Beth reference. Um, this is Alba. I don't know if everyone realized that. She's the one that was chosen, is going to have to leave her mother whenever in the next day or a couple of days. Um, so then, okay, this is what I didn't understand the first time I was watching it, was you have those men at the other table, and then they start like looking at Daryl and pointing at him, and then he excuses himself and gets up, and they follow him. And I just wasn't quite clear on why they were suddenly wanting to kill him. And it was because I wasn't, like I said, it wasn't clicking for me that the one guy was the guy he saw on the road. So that's what happened. If anybody else was confused, maybe it was just me. The guy who came in, who had gotten away from Daryl on the road, was looking at him and recognized him. And Daryl knew that. And so that's why he got up and he kind of led these guys into a dark place. And we have the end sequence where he kills them. But notice that Fede, he saw it too. He's very watchful. He's more observant than I think people realize. And so he noticed that these guys went after Daryl. He didn't get up, he didn't intervene at all, but he did see it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next episode with this. Here are these guys that are going after Daryl. So then you have this woman. This is Justina's grandmother and Fede's mother, who basically gets after Carol for this. And she was a little bit antagonistic to them from the beginning. She is the healer who was helping Carol at the beginning, but then she got mad at Daryl for like not saying please at the dinner table. So she doesn't like them all that much. But I did think that what she said here was interesting. She said, "Where do you belong?" And that feels like it is a theme definitely for Daryl and Carol, but in a lot of ways it's a show-wide theme. So I thought this conversation was kind of interesting. And this is where she says, "Come back to us when you find a better way." That was in the trailer as well. Naturally, Daryl has to get some shiny new toys in the form of weapons. This was a pretty cool weapon that he was using. And then we go into this part where everybody's dancing, and Fede is kind of actually apologizing for his mother right here. He says, "My mother's very passionate," and Carol just says, "Well, she has a point. It's not entirely my business." And they start talking, and he's basically explaining, what they're doing and the way that these people feel about it. And then it's interchanging those scenes with Daryl fighting with these three guys. All right, this is where they burn the big dragon. Um, it was a little bit hard to get screenshots at this point. This is Alba and Justina, but obviously the screenshot's not that great. Same with Daryl fighting these guys. It just gets to be kind of blurry because there's a lot of action going on. So I didn't get all of Fede's dialogue, but let me read what he says. He says, "We burn old things to welcome the new. It's a ritual of renewal." And when he says we burn old things, he says something in Spanish. It's an como la fale. Anyway, you can read what he said. I'm sure I'm butchering it, but it means the fires. And if you look that up, if you put in that Spanish phrase, it'll give you all the information about this is a real, something they celebrate. It's a real ceremony called the fires. He says it's a ritual of renewal, hoping to be reborn and find a better life than this, a better future before us. He also says la quema, which is the burning. So my point is that even though this is a real cultural thing, they're using a lot of fire words. Fire, burning, we're seeing it burn, we're seeing torches, all of that. Then he starts talking about how they once conquered the world, and then couldn't figure out what to do with it. And eventually Spain kind of imploded, and he talked about how they started to turn on each other and became their own worst enemies. And again, I think these are show-wide themes, and he's saying that we do this to keep that at bay. We do this so that we can survive, but also so that we're not imploding like that again. And meanwhile, these are a little bit blurry, but they're pictures of Daryl fighting these guys. And then he says, "My duty is to protect my people from every threat." Daryl pushes one of these, and I think, so this guy, he pushed him over into the walker pit, but when he looked, he had managed to grab on by his hands, and I'm pretty sure this is the guy that was on the road who saw him, right? And so now this guy's begging for his life. And, Daryl is pretty ruthless about it, but I will say this was one of the guys he was in the group of the men who were going to kill Roberto and Justine, so I don't think he's, the greatest guy. And Daryl does cut him so that he falls to his death. And this is Carol looking around for him, but this is the last shot. So the other thing that I wanted to say that I'm kind of seeing, but I don't think we've developed it all. This is not a spoiler if you've watched the whole episode. And then if you look at the promo for the trailer for the next episode, I'm reasonably sure that Alba was not actually the name that was on the ribbon. I think Justina's name was there. If you look into the promo for the next one, she's looking at her ribbon and she's crying. So I'm thinking what happened is that hers was chosen. It was supposed to be Justina, but remember that Fede is her uncle, and he said Alba because he doesn't want it to be Justina. And it's probably both because obviously she's his niece and he loves her and he doesn't want that to happen to her. But if she can get through this one, probably her and Roberto will get married and she won't be in danger anymore. And I would assume that would mean that maybe they don't have to run away. He wants to keep her there with him, so he's protecting his niece, which sucks for Alba, but especially as young as she is, she's much younger than Justina. Anyway, but I'm assuming that that is going to be found out at some point, again, based on the preview for next time, and that it's going to be Justina who is taken. I'm not sure how that will play out exactly, but I'm assuming that's where they're going with it. And I was thinking about that and I was going, okay, there's something here that has to do with Beth, that's like a parallel for her that has to do with like a surrogate. And what I was thinking, I might end up changing this a little bit as it develops, and as I come to understand it more, but I was thinking that it seemed that everything was going to be okay at Grady. They went in with the prisoners. They actually did the exchange so that they had both Carol and Beth. And it seemed like everything was okay and it was going to work. You even had Rick and Dawn saying, basically, pleasure doing business with you in a really kind of sarcastic way. But then something went wrong, right? And it was Noah. And then she ended up being sacrificed anyway. And I think this is how they are playing that out here with Justina. It was like, seemed like everything was going to be okay. Her name was not read. She was going to be able to be with Roberto. Beth would have gone with Daryl. We all know it would have developed from there, their relationship. Um, but something's going to go wrong and she's going to get sacrificed anyway. Meaning, in this case, she's going to be the girl who was taken. So I'm assuming that that's what we're going to see in the next episode. And so just to point out that they're playing out, they're doing a replay of Grady here with the situation. And I think that's probably going to be, I mean, we know that Carol will kind of guilt him into it from the trailer, but that is going to be a lot of what spurs Daryl to go help Justina, not only because he's kind of developed a relationship with her and Roberto, not close or anything, but he knows them and they helped Carol. And but also because he knows exactly what that's like to think that everything is going to be okay and then lose her anyway, and how disheartening that is. And so, for Roberto's sake, he'll probably go get her and bring her back. Anyway, so that's what I'm assuming. And like I said, I don't think that's a spoiler. If you watch the trailer, that's what it looks like to me. And who knows, I could be wrong about the details again. So, that is pretty much what I have. I'm just scrolling through my notes here to see if there's anything else. It was, to me, it just went by really fast this episode, and I think that was because it was so much um, action and so much, more plot than anything else. Actually, W.D. Way did point out that when we saw Antonio with the barbecue, we've seen barbecues a few times, specifically around, when Beth was there. We saw one at the beginning of 401, which is just before the Bethel hug. Carol was grilling when Patrick walks up and thanks Daryl for the deer. And then, of course, there was the grill at Terminus, which was right after Beth disappeared. So I don't know if that's something they're going for, but it's true that we don't see barbecuers and grills all that often on the show. Um, what else? Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm sure you guys will pick up some details that I missed. Feel free to send those in. But I hope you all enjoyed it. I know that I really did. And I will do the best I can to get some more videos out this week. And yeah, just liking where the show is going and can't wait for more. I'll talk to you guys soon.